I want to go back to something that, on Baylor and Brigham Young. I've seen this on the website, the premium section. Yesterday in the conversation, Dave Aranda made it very clear, and I'm not sure how many people actually listened to it. He saw those eyes that some guys were a little bit like wide-eyed. He kept warning everybody. And again, it's part of experience, youth, whatever. But I've seen some people like say, Travis yesterday came on and mentioned that the moment might have been too big for them. I agree, and that's not a criticism. That's being honest. And Dave Aranda all but said the same thing, that it might have been a little bit much for not everybody, but there were some players that probably got caught up in it all, and that's a normal thing to do competitively if you've not experienced it before.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but it was very clear by just watching the broadcast that it was too big for a lot of guys. Like those eyes that he talked about, you could see those on television. So I don't know what, maybe whoever's criticizing that is watched a different TV feed or something, or they were there in person and they were sitting up high and couldn't see the bulging eyes from young Baylor players. But I saw them. You saw them. We all did. And we all walked away from that game not criticizing the heck out of the team and bashing them as losers or anything like that. We have had the most well-reasoned response to this loss of just like, hey, credit to BYU, and for Baylor, obviously some things to work on and learn from, and that's basically the story, folks. That's it. There's no overreacting to the loss or saying that BYU's overrated or that Baylor's overrated or whatever. I think Baylor's a fine team. I don't know how good they are just yet, and I think that until some playmakers emerge, it's going to be a big question mark of how good they can really be. But I think you absolutely saw there was a number of guys where the moment just got way too big and way too hairy, and not that they couldn't walk and chew gum or any of that, but yeah, that made a difference in just overall execution. That made a difference in 17 penalties on Baylor's side. That made a difference in really little to no explosive plays, and BYU made a big difference as well. So saying that, I mean, that's just to be expected when you have a bunch of players who haven't played that much going into an environment like that and being relied upon. And, some people handle that differently. And a lot of guys learned a really tough lesson, and hopefully the next time they trot out in front of a crowd like that or similar to that, they will realize, hey, just take a deep breath and go do your thing. That's all you can really do, and they'll be better for it. And I think that's what most people are holding on to.
Well, and look, the rest of their road schedule is places that even when they've won games, they've not classically played great in them. They've not rolled into Iowa State and blown them out in Ames. They've not done that to West Virginia
haven't won in Morgantown, period.
Yeah, they haven't done that to West Virginia, period, in Morgantown. They beat Oklahoma up pretty good one time in Norman, but still, it's not a place that I think people are sitting there clamoring to go play.
And it's also, we say it over the one time that we all know that one time that they did that.
So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough to win on the road. It's tough for anybody to win on the road. Road winning streaks, there are lots of great home winning streaks of, many teams have these ridiculous, they've won 60 games in a row at home. And then what's their longest road winning streak? And even the great ones are 12 because it's tough to win on the road. And Baylor has to get over that though, and they have 1 week to do it because this week, they're at home against Texas State. Next week, they get to go on the road again to Ames, Iowa, a team that's pretty good on defense. We don't know about their offense really yet, but the crowd will be, even at 11 o'clock in the morning, loud and frothing at the mouth because they've been thinking about that game all week at Ames.
Guess what? Yes, exactly right. Ames, they also feel kind of, just kind of get the feeling that, that Baylor kind of took away their spotlight about a year ago or so. Yeah, they did.
I mean, they did, but I mean that's on Iowa State. That's
they've
their
also
fault.
beaten Iowa State with some cold-blooded last-second wins as well. It's kind of developed into a nice little rivalry in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, for Iowa State fans, they think Baylor's dirty, and they, feel like the game a couple years ago in Ames that, it was Baylor's fault that the players got into it, even though it was very much a back-and-forth situation. And then there was the whole fans thing, last year, or was it?
The shade or whatever.
They didn't have shade. Even though we just got done hearing about Texas doesn't have AC in their locker rooms, and everybody's just yeah, of course, that's college football, that's how it goes, and there's locker rooms that are painted pink, and there's all these different things, but that was a whole thing for Iowa State fans last time around was, oh my God, the AC, we didn't have shade. So there's little petty things like that from that rivalry, if you want to call it that. I just think the two teams don't really like each other. And I think more than it being about what Iowa State didn't do last year and Baylor taking their spotlight, I do think there's an element of that, but I just think there's this pettiness or just kind of dislike in general that is already going to create a little bit of that fire for the folks in Ames. And yeah, there's some of what you said as well of like, they've done what we wish we could have been doing. That'll be an interesting.
They're
that'll
both
be an interesting
competing
test.
for the same thing.
Yeah.
Iowa State, TCU, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Baylor. They're all trying to be relevant, consistently sustain it, and trying to be the ones that take that next step. And Iowa State looked like they had 2 years ago. They played for the Big 12 title, lost. Baylor last year played for it and won it. They lost it in 2019. They're all fighting for the same thing. The TCU-Baylor rivalry is not just going back to Art Briles and Gary Patterson just didn't like each other and all the petty things that were said. They're both the same in a lot of ways. Yes, part of it is because of the start of the Big 12 left TCU out. My God, that's been 25 years ago. But it's still there. Both private schools, both of them are small schools. Both of them are fighting for guys that are diamonds in the rough. And that's what creates the rivalries at Iowa State. If Brigham Young does not at least give you some experience for when you're on the road in Ames, then you weren't paying attention. On the road in Morgantown, on the road in Lubbock, on the road in Norman, and in Austin. And who knows how much that game might mean by the end of the year. And the game in Morgantown's on a Thursday night.